How you doing? Thought I would talk about a king named King Unis, who lived about 4,000 years ago. And but I first mentioned that the people who first arrived on this planet, the human beings, their first need was food and drink. And it required knowledge to do that. So people needed this knowledge to survive. Their very survival depended on it, on finding food and drink. But when we get to King Unis also was interested in the acquisition of knowledge, or knowledge of self. So it is said that King Unis ate the gods and acquired their knowledge. Oh, well, how did this come about, you know? So it turns out that King Unis, on eating the gods, was actually destroying his value system. Value systems can be very dangerous when they are full of biases and hatreds, animosities, etc. A value system can be very destructive. It becomes a god because it directs people's thinking, their actions, their behavior. Is very often determined by their value system, a system that they believe is themselves. The value system, they say, is who they are. Well, King Unis set out to destroy his value system because it had become like his god or gods, different values. Can give a value to each god, if you know, like that. Give a god, each one of them, a value. So he comes along, and he's devouring these gods, which turn out to be his values, the values that he has determined are more destructive for him, and so he will devour them. But devouring the gods and assuming their knowledge occurs when the value system or a value is gotten rid of. A person feels somewhat relieved. As we know that a person who carries a burden on his shoulders is very antagonistic to him or her. When they get rid of that burden, they feel instantaneous relief. They're happy that the burden is gone, whatever it might have been. So we see now that Unis is eating the gods, etc. And we can get an understanding why, and why the term gods was used in order to express values. And so we also see that the Last Supper on Jesus was about to have his last meal when he was surrounded by his disciples, etc. Well, Jesus was there to devour the gods, i.e. values, that he thought was detrimental to the way of life that he wanted to live. So we see Jesus sitting at the table, but he's just staring at the plate. Nothing was in the plate. You couldn't see anything in the plate, indicating that Jesus was there to eat his values, i.e. gods. You see? And when he ate the gods, he soon resurrected. Because he had cleared the path. He had wiped away the so-called values that would have inhibited him from resurrecting. You see? So we see that Eunice also used words of power. It says that Eunice weighs his words with hidden of name. Words with a hidden of name, hidden name. That means that they were words of power. Because words of power have no verbal meaning. The words of power was transmitted to the age and generation of Eunice over the years, many, many years, because the first human beings didn't have a verbal language. They copied sounds off of the animals, which became later words of power. You see? And so these are the words that Eunice used during his rituals. And he referred to them as hidden of name, because they had no verbal meaning, therefore no name other than words of power, which is a general description of all the words. Simply words of power or mantras. Now we hear of people speaking in tongue. People go to church. They get overwhelmed with feelings of extreme bliss, pleasure, happiness, etc. And they start speaking in what they call a strange tongue, a strange language, which speaking in tongue is not a language, not a verbal language, you see. Speaking in tongue is to speak words of power that people spoke probably millions of years ago on this planet, when they mimicked the animals and whatever sounds they heard, even the sound of the wind or a falling tree, etc. These sounds became words of power. And so we see now that why Eunice ate the gods. And we see also that Christ or Jesus ate the gods also. And so we see that the gods are equivalent to the value system of such folks, because the value system leads a person and has a great effect on a person's decision making, controls the person to a great extent. Therefore, the value system becomes the person's leader, the person's gods. Okay, thank you. Subscribe.